Solution or distraction? Both words being used to describe President Trump's bold new housing initiative, a 50-year mortgage aimed at tackling the nation's affordability crisis. The plan would allow home buyers to stretch their mortgage payments out over half a century, 20 years longer than most conventional loans. The administration says the move would lower monthly payments, open the market to more first-time buyers, and help stabilize housing costs nationwide. Critics warn it could lead to higher overall interest payments and keep Americans in debt longer, some even calling it a distraction, saying it does little to solve the affordability crisis and shifts attention away from bigger economic issues facing the country. The proposal is expected to reach Congress before the end of the year, setting up what could be one of the most significant housing policy debates we've seen in decades. Joining us tonight to discuss is Seattle University economics professor Joseph Phillips. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Phillips.
You're welcome, Joyce.
Okay, let's start with how this kind of mortgage would affect areas like Seattle, like Western Washington, where we already know a lot of families are struggling to even buy homes.
Well, I don't think it's going to have a great impact, to be honest. When people start thinking about the pluses and minuses, they'll probably opt against it. But as you said earlier, the so-called benefit is stretching out the mortgage from 30 to, say, 50 years. The monthly payment is less and therefore more affordable. But there's a couple of downsides on that. One is you're going to be paying a lot of interest over the life of that mortgage, probably twice as much as you would pay if it was a 30-year mortgage, at least. And then the other thing, it takes a very long time to build equity in the house. So one reason why people often want to have a house as opposed to rent is they want to build equity, right? They want to have something in their wealth portfolio that's related to the value of their house. That's going to take a really long time to happen with a 50-year mortgage. So that will mitigate against somebody finding it to be attractive. So I think it's a very mixed bag, and people will be looking at it very cautiously.
Yeah, clearly a lot to consider. What about supply and demand? Could this kind of long-term mortgage drive up housing prices even more because of increased purchasing power?
I don't see it having a huge impact on housing prices because I think there's other factors that are driving that. What might happen, though, is interest rates will be higher for these kinds of mortgages because if you think about it, as a lender, if you're holding a mortgage for 50 years, there's just more risk in that, right? More things can come along and happen. And then the other side of it is, a 50-year mortgage, interest rates change over time, right? So as a lender, if you lent the money out at 5%, and then someday there's a lot of inflation and, mortgage rates are at 10%, you're stuck with this very low yield mortgage. So all those things combine together to probably raise the risk for a lender, and therefore they're going to raise the interest rate on that sort of a mortgage.
And then you touched on this just a bit. What would be the impact on generational wealth, especially for those communities who have historically faced barriers to home ownership?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is it's going to take a very long time to actually accumulate wealth because in most of the early years of that mortgage, people will just be paying interest expense. They won't be really paying towards the principal of the loan. And it's only when you pay towards the principal of the loan that you have a hope of, getting some equity in the property. Now, of course, it's the reality that very few people actually hold their mortgage for the lifetime of the mortgage, right? So most people get out of it one way or the other because they move and so forth and so on. But, if you just look at it in terms of people that hold the mortgage for the lifetime of the mortgage, it's just not going to be a very good way to build equity. The other issue is if you look at the typical 30-year mortgage, most people are getting that mortgage paid off by the time they retire. You don't want to be paying a mortgage when you're retired and your income is less, right? So what's going to happen with the 50-year mortgage is you're going to be into your retirement years and still making pretty big payments on the mortgage.
So this is targeted to first-time home buyers. Let's take your average 30-year-old, almost my kid's age. What are the top 3 or 4 things that somebody who's a first-time home buyer, really young in their 30s, looking out long-term, starting a family and all of that, what are the top 3 or 4 things they must consider before they enter into something like a 50-year mortgage?
Yeah, so if they're going to stay in that house for all 50 years, they're going to be 80 years old when the mortgage is paid off, right? So they'll have been retired for probably 10 years or so, and it'll be a struggle just to finish it out then. The other thing is they're going to be very, into their 60s and 70s before they're really starting to see any equity in the house, any value in the house, right? And then the other thing on top of that is, they're probably going to pay 2 times the value, at least 2 times the value of the mortgage. So if you're buying a $400,000 house, let's say, you're going to end up paying in interest, not towards the principal, but an interest, 1.2 million or so. It's going to be way more interest expense that you end up paying than it is equity in the house that you retain in the end.
This is an easy yes or no question because I'm out of time. The president thinks this is a great idea. Personally, Professor Phillips, what do you think?
Well, I am not going to recommend it to anybody if they ask me. So there you go.
There you go. So grateful for your time and your expertise, economics professor from Seattle University. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.